No, Dave, no. There we go. Welcome, everybody, to Talking Niagara this morning with myself, Peter Giblett, and himself, Dave Wheeler.
Hello, everyone, and a big shout out this morning to Jasmine, who recognized me at a grocery store when I was buying stuff. She says, "I know you. You got a podcast, don't you?" Yeah. So big shout out to Jasmine.
Yeah, good. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, it'd be any day now. I'll be fighting my way through crowds of paparazzi. You know,
Well, I always thought you did on a Sunday. I always thought you did on a Sunday night. Especially when
I did
you
for
were
bingo.
caller. Yeah, and
definitely.
it was all the thronging women chasing you that that was what I spotted at Kojiko one Sunday night.
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
Get away! I don't need this kind of attention.
Well, my joke was always my biggest problem as a TV celebrity, as a TV bingo caller celebrity, was the paparazzi and groupies, and the fact that I couldn't find either one.
Yeah. Good morning, Mike, and good morning, Chris Simone. Welcome. Okay, so Prime Minister Justin Trudeau basically has said his government's aware there's a lot more work to do to ensure that Canada meets NATO's defense spending target. Yeah. Why didn't they do that when they were called out? When we called them out like 3 months ago? Was it 3 months ago? That was something like that.
We've been making mention of that for a very long time on this show, off and on.
Yeah.
And it's a humiliation to me that we can't come up with our own money.
Well, it's not about overspending. It's just about spending the right amount, what was agreed to in the treaty, right?
Yes, indeed. And to be fair, Canada's not the only one that's sloughing off on this. We've got the big guy down south of us with all the big bombs and all the big weapons, and so we think, well, they've got lots, and if we only pay 1%, they're not going to notice. Well, they did.
Yeah, they did.
And we have what, two dozen senators and congressmen have finally, like, this is a thing that's been irking the United States for a very long time. We're the best buddy of the United States. And the United States has finally said, kept saying things on the quiet, hinting here and there, and we keep reading about it. So finally, they got a big letter with a whole pile of senators, including Mitt Romney and Ted Cruz, and from bipartisan groups saying, "Come on, it's about time you can't welch on your promises anymore."
Yeah, we're talking here 2% of GDP.
Yes, Canada has been obliged to use 2% of its GDP to fund NATO. Now, when Trudeau, to be fair, when Trudeau first came in, it didn't look as if we're going to need it. It looked as if the world was going along at a more peaceful pace, despite the fact of he should have known better, because in 2014, that was the disruptions that were happening in Ukraine. They began then. So, but he kind of had this attitude that we don't need that stuff. Those are war machines. He kind of had a hippie attitude towards it. And to be fair, I had a kind of a hippie attitude towards it too. But I was a little bit smarter than him in the fence. Like, you're nice to be nice to everybody, call on peace, but have a big stick just in case you need it.
Yeah.
Why do police have firearms? I mean, they don't need it 99.99999 times they have it, but they have it if they need it. What gives a police officer or military their authority is the firearms and the weapons they have. Unfortunately, have to do that. I would love to have a country where police don't have to have guns. But anyway, that's a bit of a divergence. Right now, Trudeau and his government have always made an excuse. Now, they were really put on the carpet by. Now I'm gonna have to give a slap on the back to old Trumpy there. He's the guy that's come around and said, look, you're not living up to your obligations. And we are the United States, and we're sick of holding you all up. And of course, he brought Canada out, but the other European nations were doing the same thing. He says, we can't keep holding you up. This is an agreement. We asked for 2%. Everybody agreed on it. Now, it's interesting that Trudeau no longer is defensive or deflecting. He has promised that we will. In the past, he was saying, "Oh, we'll never get to that 2%. We don't need to." But the heat's on him now, really hard. And what's one of the first things he does? He blames the previous administration. Over 9 years ago. I mean, they haven't been in government since 2014, and he blames them.
And again, isn't deferral just another way to kind of go, essentially what I see here is actually he's saying, yeah, okay, we'll do it tomorrow, right?
Yeah, and basically he's doing the same thing he does to the taxpayer. We're going to get this done. You can count on it next week. The budget's going to pay for itself. These kind of promises, but you know what? NATO and the United States aren't putting up with it. They're not the Canadian taxpayer. They're not the average Canadian who is used to one party or another. This is an obligation outside of Canada, and you can't lie about this or deflect about it. You have to say what you're going to do. And in Canada, in 2029, Canada's defense spending is estimated to rise to 1.7%, 5 years after the agreed upon deadline of 2024. They were supposed to be there in 2024. And of course, part of that reason is the government debt is so huge right now. And that's going to stay that way because for the next year, because Trudeau's going to want to get, he's going to be like any other party, basically spend like a drunken sailor in the year before the election to buy some votes. And but we need. But
again, defense spending doesn't necessarily buy votes.
No, I'm not saying that defense spending buys any votes. I'm saying that that he's going to have to. He's one of the reasons why he can't come up with the money right now is because we are so much in debt, and that is because, and that's going to continue because he's Trudeau, like any other government before the election, is spending like a drunken sailor, throwing money everywhere, trying to buy votes, and of course the housing initiatives that they've come is one of those things. Suddenly, they said there wasn't their province to do that, but suddenly they thought they should, so they're throwing money around, all kinds of things. They know that they could buy a certain amount of votes by throwing around a lot of money, and that's keeping them from coming up to their obligations. That's my feeling, because there's the debt ratio is so high that it's keeping them away from meeting their 1.7. They're supposed to move up gradually. They were supposed to hit the 1.7 target this year, but it looks like they're not going to make it to 2029. We'll see what happens when we're quite definitely going to get a government change next year. We'll see about that. We might get a.
Well, actually, I would see Poilievre as actually pushing that spending up.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of Trudeau blamed the previous government, said, "Oh, well, it went to 1% under the previous government." Well, that was 9 years ago, and the call for fixing that all over the world has been going on for quite some time. He's known about that, and what he did is he canceled the F-15 fighter contract that the Conservatives had. Now, the Conservatives were about to spend a lot of money on the F-15 fighter contract, and that would have pushed their spending up in NATO.
Yeah,
Trudeau canceled it. He didn't like the idea from the very beginning. He said it cost too much. We're not going to do that. When asked about the NATO obligations. He was pretty glib about it. We don't need to do that. And guess what? When the Ukraine war happened and it started to look worse and worse for Canada, suddenly he's taken that contract that he ripped up and put the pieces back together. So they took the conservative effort of getting the F-15s, said the country didn't need it, now suddenly changed his mind and are using that contract all over again, reigniting it.
Yeah.
Like I said, putting back the pieces and then kind of running away every time. Everyone says, hey, you said you were totally against that fighter contract. I mean, it was in your, how come you're suddenly doing it? Run away.
Yeah. And of course, the other thing about that is you put back on the table the order that was rescinded. Do you think you're top of the priority list? No. They'll probably even put you to the bottom of the priority list. You know, even if Canada's natural place was in 5th place, let's say, that you'll suddenly be at the bottom of, you'll be in 25th place because you pissed off the supplier.
Yeah, but they're advertising. They blame the Harper government, and yet they took the Harper government's initiative to buy the fighters and canceled it. And but when they reignited the contract, one of their big selling points, they actually just took the whole issue and just put liberal over top of conservative, because the talking points are exactly the same. I remember that the conservatives were selling it as trying to get as many parts for the fighters built in Canada, as many different aspects of the fighter, and that was part of the deal that they were arranging with the whatever the McDonnell Douglas, whoever's making the fighter, right?
Yeah.
And so they were making this deal to make sure they bring as many parts and as many manufacturing jobs into Canada from this contract, and that's the selling point of the Liberals right now. They all they did was blow the dust off the contract and just said put wherever was conservative, they just scratched it up, put liberal, and then read it off. I'm glad they did it. I really am glad they came to good sense about it, because
in some respects it's too little too late
in a way, but we have turned the corner, and I think this was a big eye-opener even for a guy like me who felt that we were sort of moving down the peace road, that we maybe didn't need as much in the way of weapons, although I often think that our military is too small. I always have thought, and under-equipped. I don't think that's going to happen anymore, because people are going to be eyeballing it big time. And look, it takes the people from outside of Canada to point it out, to get the fire lit underneath our people here. It was so humiliating to the average Canadian. The Liberal government had to respond. But the more important thing here is we see the world for what it is. We have China threatening war on Taiwan. We have China and India always at loggerheads. We have an expansionist Russia going on right now. There are military threats all over the world. We have an enviable alliance, the NATO alliance. I mean, this is historic, and we have to live up to our obligations there. NATO has to be strong, and it has to be united, or its effectiveness isn't any good.
Yeah.
And I think unfortunately the old Theodore Roosevelt thing, speak softly and carry a big stick kind of thing. Be nice to everybody, but have a big stick just in case they're not nice to you.
All right. Yeah, I think enough said there. Unless
my only conclusion here is, go ahead.
Mike Cushman's making the point. Any military contract should be given to Canadian firms the cancellation of the fighter jets was a huge waste. We could have invested in naval things if they allowed the Conservatives investment in the first place.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things we can do. Look, this investment, look, in the United States, they do that quite good in their military industrial complex. They feed that all the time with lots of money, lots of senators and congressmen making tons of coin through that thing. But it provides directly 800,000 jobs, the military complex, and that's not counting all the spin-off jobs. So 800,000 direct jobs, and we could do that too. Unfortunately, we're going to need the military stuff, and I would say in the end, we want our military to be as complete as it should be. We should have a good, sound, full military, and it should have the best of equipment possible. What are we doing? Sending our Navy into war on some old steam-powered hunk of junk that lists, and like when we went to the Iraq War, it took us a month to get there. You know, we're supposed to be a minesweeper. The war was almost over before our boat even got there, or ship, pardon me.
Yeah.
So none of that anymore. Put the brakes on. We have men and women whose lives will be saved depending on the kind of equipment they'll be using. So let's get the very best. Yeah.
Okay. So moving on, Lyons Narrows project in Chippewa was withdrawn in October of 2023, and yesterday, staff recommended refusal of this project, and hang on, I've got a comment already on this one. So Chris Simone said people happy that Lions Creek project was deferred. Yes. I think it's, we got to take what's the responsible route here, and make sure that we save the wildlife. There are certain parts of this could be available, but I think like only the section that's on Stanley should be open and accessible. The rest of this stuff that's on Lions Creek, no, shouldn't be developed.
There's a bunch of different reasons. Mike says the Niagara Falls City Council decision to defer the Oaklands Golf Course King Waldorf Campground is another stall tactic. The region, the city advisors, all say no, but the councilors have to pay back their rich friends. We don't know how many councilors are involved in this right now. I don't even know why this has come back up, to tell you the truth. The developer or the owner is Anthony Butera, and he's brought this back up, and it was summarily turned down, and he's bringing it back up. I think he's trying to get some kind of hearing on it, but the city staff has come out and quite definitely come up against this whole thing for a number of different reasons. Oh, yeah. One thing is there's a plan for Grassy Brooks. There's a study there going on. There's complaints here among the business people on Stanley Avenue who would say that this would be an infringement on their businesses. They have complaints. It very, very much here it is, the Stanley Avenue Business Park, and be contrary to the city's employment land strategy. So that interrupts the employment land strategies that are there as well. Yeah.
It does, because that whole section south on Stanley Avenue was designated as business land.
Yeah, so I really understand why, like Angelo Butera says, this Craig Rowe, the senior planner and agent for the developer, and has explained the rationale for the deferral request, which was sent to the city a few hours prior to the October meeting. Having just seen the staff report on Thursday, there's lots of comments and so on. The deferral request for I think what he's trying to do here is he's trying to put it out of the hands of the city and try to get some sort of hearing on it, because it doesn't make much sense. I don't understand. Like there's the Grassy Brook secondary plan is what was mentioned in council yesterday, and it had been completed by the October meeting. So I just don't understand it. There's lots of interesting stuff here, but it still doesn't come down to the fact that why is this being brought up again so soon after it was turned down? This is an unpopular development in the city.
Down. Mike, Dave, it wasn't turned down. It was actually deferred by the developer.
Oh, deferred. Okay.
Right. It wasn't turned down. It was deferred by the developer after the staff had made negative, clear negative voices against this proposal. The developer withdrew tactically, I suspect, to actually try and get, to try and come back to the drawing table and see if they could appease some of the, some of the questions about it.
Well, it was going to get turned down, let's put it that way, because of the staff reports. So they pulled it out before it was actually summarily turned down, basically. And what you said there tactically, right, was the thing going. But I'll sort of rephrase it. Why did they this come back up when they know it's really unpopular with the people of Niagara Falls? The staff don't like it. I mean, nothing much has changed about it, and they've brought it up again. So I don't know why they did this without very much variance in what their original proposals were.
Yeah, and biggest challenge about this is that I think a lot of local people, of course, are opposed to it because of the fact that it has, is really problematic with, there's already a road that really is as big as it should ever grow, that is likely to kill wildlife, particularly snapping turtles and the like, that has no tunnels under it, etc., for saving wildlife. And this is an area they're intending to develop in an area whereby there's immediate threat to to the burrows and things for animals.
Well, it is a unique ecosystem, so let's put it that way. And we're losing in a rapidly expanding city like our own. We have to save what we can save, and that's very important. And Lions Creek is like one of those places. And here's what they're up to. It looks like, despite being in favor of the approval being delayed by council in October, the developer has since appealed the lack of decision on the proposal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, citing the council's, this is the tactical move you're talking about, in quotes, failure to make a decision on the applications. The staff report questions the validity of such an appeal, and the staff are unsure as to the logical rationale for the appeal of a non-decision. As this is where I get confused this is why right here. Staff are unsure as to the logical rationale for the appeal of a non-decision as the proponent, asked for the application to be withdrawn, thus taking away the ability to make a decision. So they pulled it out so they couldn't make a decision, then said that they were unable to make a decision, and then went to the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Well, and the point about going to the point about going to the OLT is that the OLT, now you're putting it in the hands of somebody who doesn't know the area.
Yeah, but it shouldn't even be in their hands because of the strategy here. It was for them to withdraw it so the city council could not make a decision on it, then claim that the lack of ability of the city to make a decision means that it has to go in front of the Ontario Land Tribunal, which is double talk, basically.
It is a bit of double talk here. So the city rejecting it doesn't make any, well, actually, sorry, voting to defer doesn't help the situation either, right?
Yeah, and the part of the environmental part is very well stated. But here's the other part of it: the city had redesigned that parcel, the part on 9015 Stanley Avenue, one of the parcels owned by the developer, that is part of Lines Narrows project. The city had redesignated that parcel as a future of employment lands, while the developer intent is to change the designation to residential, commercial, and environmental protection area. The matter is not scheduled for a merit hearing until March 2025.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to, here's the thing: the Ontario Land Tribunal, we really, if you want to actually do something about it, yes, it's going to be played out in the OLT. Residents need a voice.
Yeah. So it kind of I see what they're trying to do, but it's very transparent. Now, somehow, Angelo Battera has had advice or has reckoned that if he plays his cards this way, things will come out better for him. I think it's obvious trickery, though, to go in, present your case. You can obviously find out by the tenor of the council that it was not going to be approved, so withdraw it before they make a decision on it. And that's a tactic. That's a age-old tactic. Withdraw it before the decision is made. So the decision isn't made yet. So it's still technically open. And then go to the land tribunal, say, look, the council couldn't make a decision. They don't know. So we're going to have to take this to the OLT and have them make the decision. I don't know if you can get away with that. We'll find out.
Here's the question, right? If it's going to be the OLT, obviously the city has an interest because the city is a party to this decision in the OLT. Residents groups need representation there, right? Either residents individually or residents groups need representation there, right? Organize yourself, people. Let's get you represented, and let's get somebody at the OLT representing the tenants. Tenants. I mean the local residents.
Yeah, I like to point out that Leslie Land was there again. We find her any kind of environmental issue around the city. We find Leslie Land speaking out. It seems to me. Particularly in and around the area of Grassy Narrows and stuff. So I have to doff my cap to Leslie Land. Her husband Jerry, it was a Toastmaster for several years. I haven't seen him lately, but she has always been a vocal person, trying to bring the fact of environmental issues to the city. Anyway, I don't know how this will go on because Mr. Butera has definitely drawn the lines here, me against you. I want this to go. The city staff has had to use its own time and to come up with a defense and reasons why this shouldn't go ahead, for the various reasons that were already stipulated pretty much back in October. And this is taking time away from our own city staff on a proposal that was weak from the very beginning, not likely to go. So we'll find out how this ends. But I think right now it's been a kind of a waste of time for a developer and for the city, and unfortunately a waste of money.
Yeah. And even more waste of money with even more money going to be spent at the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Yeah, if it ends up going there, I don't know if it will or not.
Well, the tactic of putting it to the OLT is one that aids the developer a great deal, but I'm not sure it's realistically the city lawyers should be taking the approach that first of all they haven't gone through the city first. There's no city refusal here, right?
Well, yeah,
because the whole situation hasn't been cleared up. There's a number of questions over the even if you accept the proposal on its face value and you're accepting that it should go ahead, there's a whole number of concerns here that the developer hasn't met.
Well, it's the non-decision that they're playing on, like the tactical move you pointed out there.
Yeah,
it's all they knew the decision was going to come down against them, so they withdrew it, and then they said the council was indecisive.
Yeah,
that's very transparent to us, but I don't know how it will work on the OLT.
Yeah.
Anyway, council's doing its work. Council staff, or actually city staff, is doing its work. I've read some of the objections to it. It's very obvious. I think, to me, it was very, very plain that the city staff and their objections and their case is bulletproof. I thought when I read it. We'll see what the OLT says, if it even gets there. And I don't even know if it meets the criteria to meet there, because I think that's the very first thing I would do if I were the city or / region lawyers. And Mike Cushman says the first thing I think the region / city lawyers would say is, look, they pulled it out before there was a decision made, and then said that we were indecisive. Obviously, that is hocus pocus.
You see, here's the thing. Whilst many times the city council does vote in line with staff recommendations, even with our city council, there are times when they reject what the staff say and they vote no.
Yeah, and that's true. That's true. But I think pretty much with the amount of political and residential pressure, I don't think it's going to be a flow. We'll see, though. We'll see what happens. And then Doug and Mike Cushman, Metaphysical Mike, has said that in the role of Doug Ford, the developers always win. Yeah, I always say the Algonquin Park condos are coming soon.
Not necessarily they always win, but point taken, Mike.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. All right. So moving on. First Nations. First Nations chiefs say that Trudeau's carbon tax is discriminatory and demanding a review. They're talking primarily about the levy rebate that they say is discriminatory and anti-reconciliatory.
Well, yeah. Now the Indigenous people don't pay taxes the same way as the other residents of other citizens of Canada. which means they don't qualify for the rebate because the rebate is based on income tax. And so they're not giving it. They're not getting it. So they feel that they, in their particular life, and where everybody else's life, they get a little bit of rebate back from the carbon tax. So basically, what the carbon tax is supposed to be a neutral tax. In other words, they take the tax and then give it back to the residents. And this is supposed to incentivize you to buy cars that are more efficient, switch from gas to electric or to heat pumps or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's so what it's supposed to do. I don't think that can even happen when you are a low to mid income person in Niagara Falls. I don't think a low to mid income person can then go buy or driving a 2010 car as it is, and you're saying to them, trying to incentivize them to buy a hybrid or something or electric car. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
Someone should explain it to me. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so they filed for a judicial review of the Greenhouse Gas and Polluting Price Act, more commonly referred to as a carbon tax, against the Attorney General, the Revenue Minister, Environment Minister, and Finance Ministers.
Yeah, so they're not getting a kickback like everybody else is. And so if they're paying for gas and not getting something back for it like everyone else is supposed to be getting, of course they're annoyed by this. But they are in a completely different bracket. They have certain privileges. Now, you don't really think of, when you think of Indigenous people of Canada, we don't really think of privilege, because their lifestyles and everything, their standard of living is much lower than the average Canadian. So you think pretty much the opposite. But there are certain things. If you're a treaty Indian, they still call that treaty Indian, by the way.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to tax, they do get benefits that the rest of us don't. Right. But again,
yes, indeed. But my point here is, everybody else is, when they pay gas, they're theoretically getting a kickback. So they pay the carbon tax, and that carbon tax is supposed to come back. But not natives. When they pay, they don't get a kickback.
Yeah, I found that interesting what you said there a while back about so I'm supposed to save my $40 to $50 a month, and that'll help me buy a Tesla. Yeah, like that's going to happen. Like that really is going to happen. Hey, we'd have to save up our entire street to be able to afford a Tesla.
Yeah, you take in Canada, let's say here in Niagara Falls, what a single person's average income is around 64,000, something like that. I'm not even sure it's that high. In a household, it's around 107, 108 or something like that. You can't tell me that punishing them on the gassing, like the government would like to say, well, this by making the gas more expensive, that's incentivizing people to buy, make cleaner choices. But you can't, when you don't have the money to do that. You don't have the money to do that. You cannot go and buy a new car. You cannot buy a better used one, because you don't have the money to do that. So what basically they're doing is punishing you. And another thing that's never usually, you'll find the two arguments in the House, and it's so strange to me that the press hasn't really figured this out for us yet. You have the liberal idea as, okay, we take the money and we give you back money, and most of the time you get more than you paid. On the surface, that's true, but if you take in the layering, and we talked about this last year even, when you take in the layering, that it doesn't account for the same. So if you take the extra amount of money that the farmer has to pay for fuel and for the delivery of those products to the extra money it takes on carbon tax for that and all other transportation, then if you examine it that way, the layering effect, that you're actually losing money on a carbon tax. And of course, each party has their own way of saying it, and the NDP won't say anything, but it's hard to explain. So they play this game, and right. The bottom line here is, why do you want to take a cattle prod to that poor sap that goes to the gas station? He's got to go to work, right? He's got his family. He's making $60,000 a year. He's trying to make a living, and he goes to the gas tank and he gets a cattle prod. Here, pay this. This is good for you to pay this more money, because if I keep shocking you here, this will incentivize you to make greener choices. Will it?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I'm not convinced, never have been convinced it will. To me, the carbon tax, it's like, I've said this a few times. For example, if the government spent money on building a ship, let's say, to go out and rid the world's oceans of plastic, you might object about spending it, but it's doing a practical thing. Whereas with the carbon tax, what you're saying is, hey, we're keeping some tax money because we want to make it more inconvenient for you with gassing up your car, more inconvenient for you going to work, poor sap, just give us your money. In fact, actually, why don't we do this, Dave? I've got the new best way of dealing with this, right? You get your income after taxes, so you give us your taxes anyway in the first instance. But why don't you just give the rest over to the Canada Revenue Agency?
Basically, so yeah, if it worked, I'd be open-minded. Well, I was open-minded to it until I started to look at it, and they said they haven't sold it properly. Well, the fact is that it's hard to sell something that is very controversial and really is clear cut.
Yeah.
And when they can say you're getting back more than you're paying, how do they know? Because
and the challenge here is First Nations are clearly not getting it back.
Well, they're not getting anything because they're in a different tax cycle. So they're not getting, their life is obviously more expensive because they're not even getting a kickback.
Yeah.
So if they're paying higher in gas, then it's discriminatory.
Yeah.
I don't understand all these little areas where the government misses so much of this, and I don't kind of understand it. They make a big deal of talking about Indigenous people and making life more fair and better for them, and yet something this obvious, they overlook it. So I just don't get it, why the government seems to be so inefficient. I mean, I'm not making the joke that all governments are inefficient, but
right. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Now I have a good quote on my by J.J. McCullough. I don't know if you know him, but I'll read the quote that I saw the other day. Let's see if I can get it up here. Oh, darn it. Come on. Yeah, says here, sometimes government is so incompetent, it winds up working for your advantage.
Yeah.
In that particular, I love that quote because in that particular case, he was talking about C11, which is a controversial censorial law about social media, restrictions on social media.
Yeah.
And So I guess the government was going to try to enact C-11 using the CRTC to sort of filter out things we should or shouldn't be watching, and they can't get their act together. They're stumbling and fumbling, and they can't
This
get
one, what you're talking about here is the Online Harms Act.
Yes. And so the CRTC can't get their act together. They can't get moving on it. So it's going to be a year delay before they can enact the bill or get it to go. By that time, if we have a different government, it's going to get canceled. So that's why he means sometimes the incompetent, because he's against the bill. So because the government is so incompetent, they couldn't get the bill started because they don't know how to do it. It'll take them a whole year to be able to enact the thing. By that time, there'll be another government and it'll be canceled.
Yeah, and well, as soon as an election happens, of course, all the bills that are on the table get cancelled automatically.
Well, this one was passed, but it just cannot be enacted at the time. So it's going to be shoved online. So that anyway, that's a commentator.
Well,
if you ever seen him, he's a good guy.
Yeah, all they need to do actually is to just they just don't go through the stage of enacting it. That's all. When you've got a bill that's been passed that doesn't get its enforcement date. Yeah. All right. Moving on. So Israel promises an investigation after the deadly Rafah airstrike and international outrage. Well, we know what that investigation is going to say.
This has been a pretty contentious issue, and the United States is looking worse and worse every day because they keep pretending that the process is a solid one based on a democratic government. And they said every time the Israelis do a horrific mistake, another horrific mistake, or another problem, what happens is the United States says we're waiting for the Israelis to come up with a report, and then that report will be then they accept the report because it comes from a democratic process. So they say it's a democratic country doing a democratic process. But journalists have put them on the carpet basically and said, well, what about all the things where there has been impunity and there hasn't, like this whole process you're talking about hasn't reaped results. They keep making these horrific mistakes, whether it's the West Bank or Gaza. There doesn't seem to be the IDF is doing all these things with impunity, so the process isn't working. And the U.S. government just keeps saying, we'll deflect it and say, well, no, we trust them. They come up with a report. We accept that this was an accident. We accept that it was an accident. And when they were talking about, well, they killed those 7 aid workers from the World Kitchen, and now they've killed 45 people here. It's different. One was a different mistake than this mistake. So they say, well, they made that mistake, horrific mistake. Now they've made this horrific mistake. What is, what's the difference? Oh, there are different types of horrific mistakes. And so they have to be investigated differently. The U.S. is really carrying the water of Israel, and it's getting sickening when you're looking at the press conferences. But I'm pretty sure that the Israelis will come up with some sort of explanation. Basically, this explosion is supposed to have happened 1.7 kilometers away from where they targeted the insurgents they were after, and right away there's all kinds of things that they had an ammunition truck in the tent city. It was more likely to hit gas bottles in the tent city, but it all has to come out in the wash. But Netanyahu has apologized for it for being a mistake. At first, they tried to dodge the issue, but I think there's enough investigation on the ground that they couldn't. And so they have to say that it was a mistake. And I think there's going to be a lot more mistakes, horrific mistakes going forward. And Joe Biden keeps coming up with the red line. Well, this is the red line. This is the red line. Well, Netanyahu government has crossed the red line.
Over it.
Yeah.
It's almost
right
like
over it. Yeah. It's almost like Biden says, yeah, go ahead.
They just don't care. They're just going straight over the top of it.
Yeah, and now the U.S. has really painted themselves in a corner because they have they believe everything, or ostensibly say they believe everything the Israelis are doing their due diligence, and they believe that. And every time there's evidence against that, they have to sort of weave a little bit more in their tangled web. And make themselves look even more ridiculous. Now, I'll give you an example. I was listening to a press questioning the other day, and so they were saying, the spokesperson for the U.S. said, well, though the Israelis are doing everything possible, we talked to them, and they're doing everything possible, and they're doing everything they can. And then somebody says, well, what about that aid and stuff like that? How come they're not doing anything you're asking them to? And they said, we are. The aid that coming from this gate and the aid coming from this gate and that, well, we were the ones that really pushed them to do that, which means that he is really contradicting himself, because he said to you that the Israelis were doing all they could to bring aid and fight the war within the rules of war, but then said that we, the Americans, are responsible for making sure those gates got open and the food and supplies got through there. In other words, the Israelis wouldn't do it if they weren't pushed. So he's contradicting himself, saying that we're kind of just working with the Israelis and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. If they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, why did you have to push them to open up gates to get relief supplies in there?
Yeah.
You know why? Yeah. Because they weren't going to do it on their own, and they weren't.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the longer this war goes on, the more I think it's easy to see how a lot of people are angry over this, particularly those, particularly 35,000 plus Palestinians dead out of this. And it's going to be double that at least.
Of course, I support Israel's right to protect themselves against attacks like that. But there were 800 civilians killed in that attack, and there were 500 IDF and other security forces killed. So the first thing they did was attack a military base. They happened upon the party on the way back, and that was just really unfortunate. And we don't know how many of those people were killed by the IDF in their Hannibal directive, too. So there's a lot of things left unspoken here, but they'll always go back to that. They killed 1,200 people. Well, no, they killed 800 people, and they killed the others were soldiers. So it was supposed to be a military attack. This is no way condoning Hamas what they did. They made a huge mistake.
Absolutely, they did.
But we have to understand why, when you have oppressed people, they're going to react. And when you oppress them, they're going to come back. They're going to react, and they're going to react in terrible ways.
Yeah, and they may not react tomorrow, but they will eventually react. And this was the inevitable closure of. This was the inevitable with that closure of the, with creating Gaza in the first place.
Yeah, so none of those things could be denied, and the U.S. is always deflecting. Well, why is the United States letting that put in? Well, because Israel is a democracy, and they're entitled to make their own decisions. But then you say, well, why do you put up with the settler? Well, the reason is because of AIPAC and the Israeli lobby is so powerful. They contribute to so many of the U.S. campaigns, and they're bipartisan. So it's very easy to lend support. And Joe Biden is terrified of AIPAC. He's one of the biggest. He's one of the biggest donees. Basically, he gets the most money. Gets a lot of money from them.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party have been in the past. They're changing now, but in the past they've just been automatically Israel. They can't see. They're being paid off not to see the situation as it is. And unfortunately, most of us don't understand the situation that's going on over there. Most of us have no idea of the history of that area, so we're easily flim-flammed. And the other part of it is they know that we have a very short memory. They know that what happens to the Palestinians have very little to do with our day-to-day life, so we're going to forget about them pretty quick. They don't want the same sort of apartheid thing happening, the resistance to apartheid happening in the West as it did with South Africa. They just know we're going to forget about it, so they're gonna do their abuses, and the United States is going to carry the water for them. Unfortunately, more and more people are going to die, sadly.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So before we go, okay. So before we go on, Chris is saying thanks for the show. And we got interesting. Ross Johnson on YouTube is also saying thanks for the show. Great morning. Has to run, but all emojis apply. Peace. So insightful. And yes, we all need to work more work to do. Good day, guys. Thanks again. All right.
Thanks, Ross.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see that we're getting that kind of, we're getting more following now on YouTube. So it was a good move to move us to add YouTube to the bundle.
Yeah, if anyone out there would like us to explore certain subjects a little bit more, we try to keep a lot of it local, but because we're part of a ever shrinking planet, basically, the global village is getting smaller in size, basically, and that everything around the world affects us, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Gaza, whether it's Taiwan, even brush fire incidences on the Indian-Chinese border could be very detrimental to world economy somehow. These are all very important.
All right. Okay. So moving on to something more local, just for the last bit. Online hatred has pushed, has spewed at the LGBT community, plus whatever community, has organizers of the Pride event, Pride in the Park event in St. Catharines, basically scaling back some of the events and installing temporary fencing at Montebello Park. And this was actually raised 2 days ago in the St. Catharines city, a couple of days ago by St. Catharines, or the mayor, Matt Sisko, about this. And he was talking about it the other day. And they're taking these threats seriously, basically. And probability is nothing will happen, but the challenge here is that that something could happen, right?
The problem is a lot of homophobia, it appears, but I'm not so sure. There's a lot of vocal a lot of stuff online and stuff, but a very few amount of people can do a lot of that. I'm not so sure that as many people as they think it is, but let's put it this way: there is a small amount of group that would be violently disposed to the gay thing. They are particularly these people who are against it often cite the children thing. They don't want children involved in this. They don't want children involved in the drag queen storytelling at the library. The drag queen and the gay thing with children is I know is a problem from them. But my original point is how many people out there are actually against it and are going to, I mean, it seems to me that there's not a whole lot against it, but the very few that are may be very, very vocal and maybe even violent. Who knows?
Yeah, and that's the part of the issue about it. It's like, well, these guys just really want to have a fun weekend, and that's the whole point about Pride in the Park, and and basically, yeah, go at it. Have a great weekend, guys. I don't think Dave or I are not going to oppose you.
No, but what I do want to do is find out where the objections mostly are.
Yeah, I just find the problem here is that, well, Matt Sisko, in his broadcast when he was talking about this yesterday, he was saying it's online threats, and primarily they think they're fringe groups that have no real support on the ground, but they can't take that risk.
Yeah, I can understand that, but I think the idea has become so bad that the Pride Niagara chairman Enzo D. Davidis said that he's canceling the Anthem Prime Prom, which is a popular event that allowed. This is just an aspect of it. It's not the whole thing is not being canceled. They get the two SLGBTQI plus youth to celebrate a night of dancing and performances and prom photos together. I think that's the area of objection that the average person may have, not the froth of the mouth hater, but do you really want to encourage a lot of gay kids or gay kids that don't know what their sexuality is yet or confused to get them to a prom night? So that's probably part of it. I think that's the average person may have misgivings about something like that. I know I would. The other thing was the drag queen storytelling in the library. That's another thing that would probably bother me too. In that particular case, when that happened in St. Catharines, they did have a vocal mob that came in and started yelling and calling them pedophiles. And to be honest, I think some of them honestly do believe there's an element of pedophilia here when they try to encourage kids in the, so there is a fear of that. Whether or not that's a substantiated fear, who knows? So there are elements here where you have a hate group. Definitely there's going to be a hate group. Then you're going to get a lot of your new Canadians going to object to it incredibly. Muslims particularly will be very much against.
But they won't be. A lot of the immigrants won't be ones who will be, being part of hate groups.
They have been in their own communities, have demonstrated and come out against the two LGBTQ quite vehemently. They are a lot of the minority groups are very much against things like drag queens in the library telling stories. They get out on the street and they demonstrate, and they have been physical, particularly out west. So these are all factors that we're not that all have to be included in all of this. But in the meantime, I don't think there's that many haters. There are objectors, but I don't think there's that many haters. And I hope I'm right about that. You know, as I said before about anti-Semitism, they say anti-Semitism is exploding, and everybody seems to be getting on that bandwagon. But I don't see it. I see it's the same people who are the anti-Semites are just getting louder. I don't think it's spreading.
Well, there was a big comment from Laurie Parliament about homophobia not being the issue, but I've got to get going anyway. So I'll leave this one up there. We're told we're all equal, but then you get labels and groups and prove us that we're not. At the end of the day, we're all human beings and labels aren't necessary. I don't feel the need to tell anybody I'm straight, and I don't get a parade for it. Just my thought. My best friend is gay. I have several gay friends. Yeah, exactly. All right.
Well, if I have any gay friends, they've kept it from me all these years.
Well, and I think we can then call it quits at that point because I've got to get heading off. All right.
Okay. Thanks everybody for your contributions. Thanks for listening. Anything you want us to talk about, let us know. Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace, everyone. That sooner or later it's going to happen, but oh my God, sooner it'd be way better.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.